Kia ora, and welcome to the very first episode of The Prosperity Project, where we are on a mission to empower you financially. I'm your host, Nadine.Higgins, and if you are wondering who the heck I am to tell you anything about finances, well, I'm a former financial journalist and I'm now a columnist and a financial advisor. But I do not claim to be the font of all knowledge, which is why I will be bringing in the experts and mining their big brains for all the things you need to know every week. And this week, if you started the year with a hiss and a roar, but the whole new year, new you thing is rapidly wearing off, today's episode is for you. If you want to change things up and do better financially this year, awesome. But how do you get those good intentions to translate to action and for that action to actually last beyond the end of January? We're going to attack this from two angles today to see if we can land on the formula for ditching our poor financial habits and bedding in the more helpful ones. So a little bit later, we're going to hear from psychologist Jacqui Maguire on not just goal setting, but sticking with those goals. And first up, we're going to talk to McQueen, who is a personal finance author, a financial advisor, the founder of EnableMe, and full disclosure, my colleague and my friend. She is also about as good at ticking off big goals as anyone I've ever met. So kia ora, Hannah, and welcome to the Prosperity Project.
Kia ora, and thank you for having me.
I'd love to know from you, why do you think we're so gung-ho about setting financial goals, or any kind of goals really, and so poor at actually seeing them through?
Well, I guess there's a difference between the romance, setting a big goal or any goal feels like you're taking control, but being able to execute on a plan that helps you achieve that goal is a completely different skill set. And when it comes to financial goals, being able to execute is hard because of your own situation, the volatility of income and expenses, your psychology of spending, your partner's psychology, whether you've even got the same money values, what your money values are, what is your strategy? Do you even have a structure to support that strategy? There's a lot of complexity to this. And I think too often we want to dumb it down to, well, I'm just going to spend less, or I don't know, I'm going to pay the mortgage off faster, or I do want to achieve a more comfortable retirement, or I do want to own a home. These are good kind of meaty goals, but then what? Okay, I love it. What do we want to do now? Or how are we going to increase the odds of that actually being achieved? And I think one of the problems with financial goals is often there is a bit of time between the setting of the goal and achieving the result, that leaves a lot of space for people to fall off wagons.
Because it takes a long time to do some of those things, the buying the first home or the paying off the mortgage. So do we just lose interest? Does life intervene? Or have we not got things right about how to get there?
I think all of those points. I think when something's hard and it's a long way away. Well, firstly, I think that the basic human psychology is we are prepared to sacrifice to achieve a goal. I see that with everyone's prepared to do something to get something, like the do to get.
The trade-off.
The trade-off. I think we're open to that. But what I think the challenge is that when you don't know how long the sacrifice is for, or what actually the sacrifice needs to be, not the spoken description, but kind of troops on the ground, what are we doing here? It's different to what people expect and possibly how they've been trained, and they don't then have the right training, mindset, strategy, structures to make it effortless.
So they might start doing something expecting that it's going to get them closer to the mortgage-free or the first home, and when they find out that it's not, they're disillusioned.
That's right.
Which makes sense.
Or they've gone so hard and they have put the effort, so they're conscious of what they've given up, but it hasn't translated to any meaningful result. Because we do tend to think, and I think this is also maybe just in its simplest form, if we do sacrifice, therefore we will get the return. But when it comes to finances, if you're not sacrificing the right thing, it won't translate to what you need.
And are we just a bit impatient? Sure, I'd love to be driving a Lamborghini by Christmas, but, well, not really, but, just some ludicrous goal that is out of kilter with my capacity. Do we just want to get there faster than is physically capable?
Maybe as you're younger, perhaps. I think that feels like a childish kind of assumption. I think most people, once you're ready to get onto the housing market, say. That's probably the first big financial goal. There's an awareness, I think, from most people that it's going to be hard and it's not going to be overnight. Goals around material purchases, I think if people are still focusing on that in their 40s or 50s, you've missed a trick somewhere. Let's just call it how it is, right? And there's an assumption that that person is also doing life like the rest of us.
Okay, so what is it that we have to get right then if we're going to go, okay, this year I'm actually going to do the financial goals differently? What is the sequence of events to give us the best chance of actually sticking to it and seeing it through?
Well, there's 3 layers, right? You've got to understand what's the financial objective, what's your financial strategy, and what are your financial tactics. And when I'm looking at someone, and I guess it's different depending on what life stage you're at as to what the overall objective would be. So if you're probably under 40, your objective would have been or should have been, I would have thought, to get onto the property ladder as quickly as you can. And post 40, there's an assumption that you're on the ladder, you've got a mortgage, so the objective should be to try and get you mortgage free by 50. And if you're over 50, then it's going to be, well, we need to get you mortgage free and we probably need to be thinking about growing wealth for retirement. Now, I tend to work with people who are 40 and older, so they tend to have mortgages or are very close to getting their first property. So I guess I'm coming in slightly later than when the true financial journey might start for someone. The first thing I look at is, if you keep doing what you're doing, where are we going to end up? And I think without getting too complex, and I do think people freak themselves out about finance unnecessarily, let's just get a quick kind of gauge on where you're at. So the first thing I'd say is, well, in the last 12 months, how much have you saved? And people would normally say, not much, or I don't know. And if you don't know, then you're going to assume you haven't done much. So, and the most common answer is I haven't saved much. So I think the first thing is be okay with that, if that's what you're at, where you're at. So then what's the goal? And for some people it may be that the most common goals are, we want to get mortgage free, we want to be able to create opportunities for our kids, we still want to live a good lifestyle, and within that we still might even want to upgrade our home. I mean, heaven help you if it's also to get the batch and all of those things, but there's sort of some basic goals, and there's an assumption that they want to be okay for retirement as well. Like, everyone wants to live a good life for the rest of their life, not just while they're working.
Which makes it seem like we might set goals at the beginning of the year, but these are not year-long goals. These are multi-year, decade-long goals. So you don't want to feel like you're deprived for all of that time. How often is it that what people want to achieve is not matched by what they want to do to get there? Because you kind of have to enjoy the process, because otherwise, how are you going to keep it up?
Agreed. I think that the process has got to be as smooth as possible, which means you've got to be able to see progress easily and often. And more often than not with finance, people don't see progress, which is why they fall off the wagon. They feel like they've sacrificed or gone without, and it hasn't translated to anything meaningful happening, either more money in the bank account, the mortgage paid off faster, or you getting the property or investing on something else. It hasn't translated to much. And they would conclude, well, what's the point? And I would also say, I agree. What is the point? There is no point putting effort in unless it translates to a result. Like, that just seems like just such a waste of time. And I would say that for anything in life. So then we bring it back to, okay, well, what do we put the effort into that is going to be meaningful? And I think too often we focus on the wrong things to create impact. So, for example, if you're not living within your means, you will never get ahead. I don't care what you go without, you will never get ahead. So you've got the option of, as an example, I would have clients who say, well, look, I don't spend much and I don't do this and I don't do that. And I'm thinking to myself, great, we're not frittering money on some of these things. But at the end of their expenses, there is no money left. And so I'm thinking, well, you can dress it up however you want to, you're just not getting ahead. So our options there are, we can either earn more, spend less, sell things we don't use, or try and grow wealth another way. But you normally have to have assets to grow wealth. But that's a finite set of options.
So it doesn't actually matter whether it's the coffee or the clothes or, heaven forbid, the avocado toast.
Yeah.
If at the end there's not money left over, we're going nowhere.
Yeah, you can put as much effort as you want. You can try and whatever you want to do. It's just not going to translate to anything. And so in that situation, I would say, okay, either we're going to come at this from a completely different angle or we're not going to put any effort in. Just keep doing what you're doing. Either accept that's it for me, or we're actually going to come at this from a strategic kind of perspective. And that focuses more on trying to create transformative outcomes and having the behavioural elements follow the path of trying to create transformation.
And the other thing I've heard you say a lot is about systems, that we don't, I think it's a James Clear quote, author of Atomic Habits, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we actually fall to the level of our systems. So what kind of systems do we need to underpin the right kind of financial behaviours that are going to drive the right outcome?
Yes. Well, the first thing you've got to understand is, what do you spend money on that makes you happy? Because effort normally is felt when you're required to do something you don't want to do, or it's hard. That's when you feel effort. So to finances, if you are able to keep spending on the things that make you happy, making compromises in other areas won't feel like an effort because it was never linked to your well-being in the first place. So I think one of the first things you can do is try and understand yourself. So what are the 2 or 3 things that you want to spend money on that makes you happy? Do those things. Let's keep them in the plan first and foremost, and then let's tutu with the other things first to try and create an efficient baseline. Most of my clients are comfortably inefficient. They're not bad with money. There's plenty of money coming in. It's just not translating to the progress that I would expect for their level of income. And as a rough rule of thumb, you want to know that you're saving no less than 10% of your income every year, and you're trying to get to a 20% level. And that's when you get to that level, then we're starting to apply. We can bring in the troops at that point, call for backup, because we have a whole lot more. There are many more levers we can pull once we've got that baseline really working. And so back to the systems, well, I like to work to setting an annual budget and breaking that down to quarterly chunks and what needs to be achieved monthly. I need to understand for my clients what's the volatility of that progress, because some months you aren't going to make progress. And it's not because you've spent more, it is simply to do with the timing of your expenses. But if you didn't know that in advance, if it's anything like my dieting strategy, the month I make or the week I make no progress, I'm
stuff it.
Yeah,
let's order McDonald's
for the chips, which is the worst thing you can do. And we all know that logically, but that is just a tendency that, well, sod it. If it's not going to work, well, then I'm going out with a bang. So I think understanding your volatility of progress is very, very important, and especially in those months where you have made a lot of progress. And again, that is just to do with the timing of when a bonus was paid or whatever the case is. The kids don't have all the back to school costs, or you haven't had to pay for the holiday and the car didn't get replaced or whatever. That happens in a particular month. You might feel you have done a whole lot better than what you actually have, because the plan needed to absorb that volatility, or was already absorbing that into the projections of what you could achieve for the year. So the first thing I do is I set the plan, and obviously I've got the benefit of benchmarking because I've worked with so many clients, so I know on average what people spend on different things, so I can call them out when they're just...
when they're not in touch with reality.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like between partners, there's normally one who's trying to throw the other one under the bus in these meetings.
It's not me, it's her.
Yeah. If only they didn't spend it. It just, everyone is normally culpable of the outcome of the status quo. So we get that budget, and then I try and support that with a bank account structure that alerts clients if they're about to overspend. And I don't want them to focus on anything. The key places where we overspend is what we spend on food, what your non-negotiables are, and how you structure your mortgage and insurances. Those are the key things. And if I can hone down into those areas, that will account for 80% of the inefficiency just with those. So again, don't put effort into cutting all costs. Let's just work out the ones that we just need to be more mindful around. Now, the bank account structure is helpful because in addition to, because it will alert me if I don't have enough money in a bank account, it tells me because I get declined, which you're talking to the 18-year-old at the supermarket and you're declined and you're like, no, I've got enough money. I'll just transfer that over. And she's looking at you, judging you, totally judging you. But that's a very effective way of knowing if you're about to overspend, is being declined. And I would argue that is one of the downfalls of a credit card, because you never are declined. And being able to pay your credit card in full each month simply means you're living within your means. It doesn't mean, it's no measure of any financial nous, yet so many people use it as almost like a badge of honour.
People really push back at the idea that if they pay back their credit card every month, that it's somehow enabling extra spending. They're like, no, I'm never charged interest and I get all these points. How do you counter that argument?
Well, usually we can, if we're working to a plan and we're tracking our spending, which is the next element once we've got the bank account structure, you will just save more not using a credit card. Like the studies unequivocal in that regard. And so I say that whatever we save, we could buy what you're going to buy with your points a whole lot faster with cash that you actually haven't spent. But I just don't like the psychology behind credit cards. Personally, I mean, I use a credit card and I think that there's a place for them, but they can be dangerous for a lot of people. And if your situation is tight, I would be advocating for no use of credit cards while we try and build up some buffers.
So maybe New Year goal, pay the credit card off, cut it up.
Or put it in the freezer.
In the freezer? Why in the freezer?
Well, you don't know when you might need it. I mean, because you have your rainy day events, right? Like the car blows up at the wrong time, the kids need the computer and the school hasn't told you. And like there are all these things that you might need that money for. And in the absence of having that money sitting in a savings account, it can protect you for the rainy days. But keep it for that.
Okay, so we're not cutting it up. We're literally putting the credit card on ice for 2025.
That's right. Love it.
Last year for a lot of people was hard.
Yeah.
And the forecasts are telling us it might actually still be kind of hard this year to slow on the economic front, job losses, even though interest rates are coming down. How do you pick yourself up and dust yourself off and kind of take a deep breath and draw a line in the sand and all those good things to saddle up for the year ahead and try hard again?
Well, that is tricky, because if you're going to try hard to still go nowhere, is it worth picking yourself up for that? I think perhaps the question to ask is, do I know enough to actually make progress with these headwinds, and measure it based on what you achieved in the last 12 months and your energy levels? Because even if you know enough, if you're just tired, it can be hard to sustain any effort. And if the answer to either of those questions is no, so you don't know enough, as evidenced by the fact you didn't make progress last year, and you should be able to make progress in good times and bad times. It takes a skill to make progress with a headwind, but most people don't make progress under either scenario, right? Like on the good times, that just gives us permission to relax as opposed to be smarter. And I understand that. So I think let's start first by being honest. If you haven't made progress and it feels hard and you don't think you know what you actually need to do to get ahead, I would get some help. I would have a session with a financial advisor to take stock of your situation and work out what your options are. I can only talk about my clients. My clients aren't particularly, I would say they're all financially savvy. I don't think any of them I would call a financial dunce. They all earn fairly good income, but they have been frustrated that in spite of what feels like favourable conditions, it's just not translating too much. And normally they preface it pretty early on, we don't want to give up our lifestyle, which I'm like rolling my eyes a little bit. But I understand that the smaller that trade-off can be, the more likely you are to stick to a plan. I get that. So what I find is that if I can make the goal big enough, most people will level up to it. My job is to find out, what does that goal need to be for you to try harder. So for me, if you told me, look, if you go without a holiday this year, you could pay your mortgage off 2 years earlier, say, that would not excite me. I'd be like, who cares? I would much prefer to have a holiday. Like that trade-off isn't worth it for me. But if I said to my client, you can still have your holiday, but I want you to spend 20% less. The kids can still have their activities, which will normally be more expensive than what anyone's prepared to acknowledge. And let's face it, they're not actually that talented. But anyway,
Wow,
I get
some
it.
home truths being shared today.
I get it, and I do the same thing. And maybe you've got to keep the cleaner or not. I don't know. Like, these are things that are important to me. But then we say, but I could get you mortgage free in 5 or 6 years, and I reckon we could get an investment property, and I reckon we could try and get a property for your kids as well, because it probably will feel more important to you that you're helping them with their next stage, not necessarily the current stage beyond what you're doing already. So when you suddenly think, oh, is that even a possibility? And when you show how that could be and how you're going to move the pieces around and what you do need from them, and there will be sacrifice and choices and a degree of inconvenience on some things, but if the trade-off is worth it, you level up. You level up. And I feel that the objective of the objective or the goal of a good advisor is their job is to find out what is going to be the thing that makes you level up.
What I'm taking from this is don't just slog away for another year at a goal that may or may not eventuate. Make it sexy and make the effort worth it, because otherwise, why are we trying so hard?
Yeah, life is hard already. Don't try unless it's going to create a meaningful impact with everything.
I said at the beginning that you are probably better than anyone I know of setting what seems like impossible goals and then going on to achieve them. What's on the New Year, New You goal list this year?
Well, I'm doing a marathon in London in a couple of months. I'm a little bit nervous about that, but that's good. I love a bit of anxiousness. You know that the goal's big enough when you can't sleep. No, so I've got that, and
it prompts you to lace up your shoes if you're feeling a bit nervous about that run, huh?
That's right. And I guess the objective for me was actually to get fit with running. It was to get fit, and so the way that I guess tried to hack myself is let's make a goal big enough that I stick to the plan, and let's make it hard enough to achieve that goal that I don't get out of it. Because people would say, why do you do an overseas marathon rather than a New Zealand-based marathon? And I get the logic. I get the logic of why. But for me, I know my personality that if it got hard, I'd be like, look, I actually don't want to run a marathon in some Hokitika. It's just, I would rather just not do that. If it was a bad day. If it was a good day, I'd be fine.
Yeah.
And I think so often people plan for good days. I'm like, well, anyone's good on a good day. What happens when it's a bad day? Because you know at any point in a goal process, there's going to be at least one bad day. And I think that the quality of a plan is allowing for that and being able to reset and rebounce from there.
Well, you're not just walking the talk, you're running the talk.
Well, I don't talk when I run.
Well, good luck. I think if I'd put my money on anyone achieving it, it's you. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
We are just going to take a quick ad break and we will be back with psychologist Jacqui Maguire. Money can be as much about psychology as it is about dollars and cents. So we are going to speak to Jacqui Maguire, who is a clinical psychologist, author and speaker, and her stated aim is to help people live a good life. So my hope today is that she can give us some good psychology tips to help us improve ours. Hi, Jacqui.
Hi, Nadine.
I'm really interested in the psychology of money because I see so many people who know better but don't translate that to doing better. Do you have any insight as to why we so often fail to do the things we say we want to do, maybe we know we should do, but we just don't do it?
Well, I think money can represent many things to each of us, Nadine. And so I suppose when it comes to habits around money, first it's understanding your own relationship or your narrative or your story about money. We've all grown up in different households where perhaps money was spoken about or not, where money may represent certain things. So you may grow up in a household where money represented success. You may have grown up in a household where actually money was not spoken about. You may have grown up in a household where there was no money, and that was a huge financial strain on the family and stress for individual family members. So I think if we can first kind of take a look in the mirror and go, when I think about money, what pops up in my mind? When I am stressed, do I act in a certain way towards money? When I think about what I'd like to achieve financially in my life or in a partnership if I'm in that, what does that look like? Can you paint a clear picture of what it means to you and have an understanding of your relationship with money? So I think that's really useful, Nadine, just to start with, because understanding and knowledge is power. I also then think it's about, are we really clear about what we're trying to achieve? And lots of people, Nadine, I'm sure you have heard about SMART goals. If you want to achieve something, make a SMART goal, and that is a goal that is specific and measurable and achievable and realistic within a time frame. I actually think it's really useful to go, what are my goals in comparison to my values, and what are my goals in terms of, can I paint that picture really clearly, and then are my actions smart? So I'm going to have the vision based on values, and then actually can I break that down through a process so that I'm focusing on behaviour, because when we focus on behaviour, I think we're far more successful at reaching the vision.
What about the mindset piece? Because you often read about, the wealthy mindset, the abundant mindset versus the scarcity mindset, the poverty mindset, whatever. And some people might go, well, I can't think myself rich. So how important is having the right mindset when it comes to money?
The way I look at it is, are your thoughts helpful or harmful to you? And I think that's way easier for people to kind of grasp than categorizing thoughts. So if I'm wanting to save this year, if I'm wanting to pay down my mortgage, if I'm wanting our family to have some more freedom or adventure, which money will therefore enable us to do that, then I suppose my question would be, if you have a thought like, I'm wanting to, cut back on my frivolous spending, or, that might be a useful thought. If I have a thought like, I'm useless and I never succeed, why bother trying? But that's a harmful thought. It's not helpful to you. That's not going to help you achieve your vision, your dream, your goal, what you're trying to, achieve. So then I think, Nadine, it's again an awareness piece. Do you have a mindfulness or a kind of bird's eye view on your thoughts? Can you catch them and go, is this helping or harming me? And if it's a helpful thought, then you run with it and you act on that thought. And if it's a harmful thought, or it's a thought that's moving you away from your goal, then I think it's about, what do you do with that thought? How do you shift it? How do you detach yourself from it? How do you kind of dial down? Often when we have thoughts, Nadine, we have emotions that then are attached to them, and it's the emotions that often drive the unhelpful behaviour. So how do I catch that thought and go, harmful, and dial it down, calm myself so I can then kind of have a clearer, more useful thought, which then leads to more helpful action.
So it's not about thinking yourself rich. It's that your thoughts inform your actions, which become your habits, and they drive an outcome.
Correct. Absolutely. And, for example, we all have habits in our life that are maybe some are useful and some are not. Like, I'm thinking about people's behaviour when they get stressed, for example. And if I get stressed, maybe I want to feel better in the moment. And maybe I have a thought that if I just go shopping, I'll feel better, and yep. In
Call
the
it
moment,
retail therapy for a reason.
Maybe that makes me feel happy and I feel good about my day, but long term, that's moving me away from that dream, my values base, or, what I'm kind of hoping to live, or how my life, I want to feel in my life. And so, again, it's that awareness piece of, is it the thought that's coming first? Is it the habit that's coming first? Can you know yourself, catch them early, and then make, wise choices rather than habit choices or irrational choices?
Motivation is usually the thing that we're all waiting for to make change. And sometimes we have plenty of it at the beginning, but then life intervenes, things get hard.
Yes.
How do you maintain the motivation when the going gets tough?
Yeah, so I think there are two things there, Nadine. The first, I think, is motivation comes from values. And I talk about values a lot because they are core to who we are. And I think if you're going to have intrinsic motivation, meaning it comes from within me rather than extrinsic, like I'm doing something for an external reward, we know that intrinsic motivation is more helpful and more meaningful to us. It's more motivating. So if I can be really clear about what's important to my life, and if I can link my financial aspirations to those values, I think you're more likely to keep on track. So, for example, if I use myself as your guinea pig on this, one of my top values is freedom. That's really important to me. I want to feel freely able to make choices. I want to, feel like I have got power and control in my life, and being financially secure helps that. So, when I'm making decisions in my life, if I'm guided by that long-term value of freedom, that might help me in the moment when I want to go on retail therapy, but actually then, that's my savings for the week, and it's going to mean that, I don't have freedom at the supermarket to choose what we have for dinner, for example. So I think there's a values part to that, Nadine. And then there's just a behavioural habit component to this, which, habit theory, Nadine, has been really thrashed around since the early 1970s. Models and theories around habits began actually trying to support people that had alcohol addictions and trying to work out how to reshape that addictive behaviour for them. And what we know is that humans work better when we can get behaviours into a maintenance pattern in our brain. So I often talk about habits, Nadine, like you've got pathways in your brain. Some of them will be like freeways. You have well oiled that pathway so much that a small trigger can pop up and all of a sudden your brain is like down the freeway and you're at the action at the other side. So when you're wanting to build new habits, if you've got a new financial kind of aspiration or you're wanting to put some new behaviors in place, and it's really important that we go, how do I build new strong habits rather than trying to stop doing old things because that's less effective? And do I be really clear about kind of what that behavioural pathway will look like? So when you start a new habit, it's like you've got a bush track. You're having to bush bash your way through it. There'll be obstacles. It'll feel clunky. It's not going to be a smooth, easy, fast but pathway. You're going to have to remind yourself. You're probably going to have to get support to help you kind of stay on track. You're going to have to do things like removing kind of unhelpful triggers around you. So, if you can think about, I need to build a new highway in my brain, what are the conditions that are going to set me up to transition this from a bush track to a highway? I'm going to have to walk it so many times in order to kind of smooth and level out that ground.
So is that where you get the repetition thing? Like you have to do it for however many days before it becomes easy. Like it's going to be hard, but once we've walked that path a few times, it's a little better formed than when we were bashing through the bush to begin with.
Yes, and the research, Nadine, says it's about 66 days of repetition in order to kind of build that neural pathway.
Except most of us have given up on our goals by about late January, haven't we?
Well, I think that's again why like New Year's resolutions don't work. They don't. Most people give up, as you say, within the month. And so I think it's then again connecting that to your values and why it's important to you, and reminding yourself of that. So whether that's visual cues, whether you've got a screensaver on your phone or a note on your mirror or, something stuck on the fridge, or have you got a way of really reminding yourself about why you are wanting to learn these new habits or put these new behavioural pathways in place?
What about telling people? Does that help? If, saying whether it's your flatmates or your best friend, or putting it online saying, this year I am going to do this. Or I did read that sometimes doing that gives you this pre-surge of achievement before you've actually done anything. So does making it public help?
I think it depends on your personality, right? Some people say a lot of stuff and they don't follow through. Other people say something and it's gospel to them, right? So I think it's about asking yourself, will that matter? Do I need to shout this from the rooftops? Is it that I just, actually need one person, my partner or a good friend who's going to support me in it? So I think, that's individual. I don't think there's a blanket rule for that one.
I've just been reading, starting to read after 2 years of it sitting on the shelf, James Clear's Atomic Habits. And he talks about making the habits you want to instill easy, visible and attractive. And we just spoke to Hannah McQueen and she talked about putting the credit card in the freezer, which I guess makes it harder to use. Can those tips help?
Well, and I suppose that's stopping a behaviour habit rather than adding a new behaviour habit. If my credit card's in the freezer, I'm wanting to stop spending on the credit card. That may be helpful because it's a barrier for someone. I suppose what I know to be true is that you are more effective if you start doing something. So if I want to stop spending on my credit card, maybe I want to start spending in cash. And so maybe, and I know Hannah talks about this a lot, maybe it's about getting your weekly budget out in cash. And once the money's gone, the money's gone. But you're building a new pathway then of I spend what I can see. So that's focusing on new rather than stopping the old.
I quite like the idea of focusing on the new rather than stopping the old because it feels less punitive, like you're being wrapped over the knuckles for naughty things you did last year and you shouldn't repeat this year.
Yes. And I think, Nadine, also we will all lapse, and that's part of that habit research from the 70s is that, yes, we want to get ourselves into maintenance mode, which means we need to think about what we're wanting to achieve and we need to set ourselves up for success and, by having the support person or getting the supplies you need or doing, all your systems that you need in place. But also part of that theory says we will lapse, and that's where mindset comes into play too, Nadine, which is if I lapse, if I do something that's not in alignment with my goal, aspiration, hope, can I catch that one act and go, hey, Jacqui, it's okay, you're human, bummer, but it's not the end of the world, and can I restart again? Because one small lapse and getting back on track is pretty insignificant. What can happen for many people is that they have a small lapse and they go, this is a sign that I can that I always fail, that I'm never successful, and then that then derails them.
So how do you stop catastrophizing? Because I feel like you're speaking directly to me now. There's the whole falling off the wagon thing, and then it's all gone to hell in a handcart. So what's the point? How do you catch it at that stage and go, okay, we had one little slip up, but tomorrow's a new day?
Yeah, so there are many ways at which we can regulate our thinking or take the emotional sting out of thoughts. There is a strategy called labeling. So, if you had a thought pattern, Nadine, of what's the point? This is all over. You might say to yourself, "Hey, this is a catastrophizing thought," or "Hey, that's a black and white thought," or you label it in a way that makes sense to you. So, anytime you have a thought like that, you catch it and you put a label on it. What that does is it engages your frontal lobe. Your frontal lobe is like your adult brain, Nadine. It helps you make good, clear, problem-solving, rational thoughts and decisions. It kind of dials down the emotional part of your brain, which is putting you on that fight, flight, this is bloody a waste of time. I can never succeed. I can never win kind of highway. So labeling is useful. And catching and noting that thought is really helpful. There's also a radical acceptance theory, which says that, when things haven't gone to plan, instead of beating ourselves up about it or ruminating on it. So ruminating is you have one thought and then it spirals into a deluge of thoughts that you just go, yep, that was a stuff up. Yep, that was a stuff up, and everybody stuffs up. I'm human. That I just accept the fact that that wasn't helpful, but I'm not beating myself up about it. I'm not reading extra meaning into it. I'm cutting it off at surface value. So that term for that is I'm just going to radically accept that this time I stuffed up. But if I can do that, and instead of spiraling, hopefully that means I can then shift myself onto a useful pathway. I'd say the last kind of helpful, quick tool for helping with your thinking is called diffusion. And what does that mean? It means often we get fused to our thoughts, meaning we kind of see them so much as fact rather than thoughts actually being words strung together. Just because you've had a thought doesn't mean it's true and factual. So diffusion is how do I create some space between me and that thought? So it might be, I'm having the thought that this is a waste of time. I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. I'm having the thought that I'm never going to succeed. That's got less emotional sting to I'm a failure and I'm never going to succeed. So that in itself can be enough of an emotional dial down to then go, hey, Jacqui, come on, catch yourself. This is just one slip. What do you need to do now?
It shows you how much it can be an emotional reaction as much as what you know you need to do with the dollars and cents.
Yeah, I think also partly why this is so tricky for people is we have something which is called contingent self-worth, so financially contingent self-worth, which means for many of us, we've been or had it drilled into us that being wealthy or being financially successful equals being worthy as a person. It's quite different in Eastern countries where often, financial success is seen as a collective outcome. And so again, I think it's useful to be mindful around those initial stories around money, what we've been taught about who you are as a person, and seeing financial success as one element of your life, not your entirety of your character and your worth as a person.
I think we could do a whole podcast just on that one topic, but I just have one final question. What about rewards? I don't know what part of the brain this relates to, but what about that little treat yourself? I did the right thing and so now I can have a little something. Does that help you stick to your goals?
That's your dopamine system in your brain. So dopamine is your feel-good hormone or your reward hormone. And so, yes, I think small rewards along the way absolutely can be helpful. I would just link the reward to behaviour. So instead of linking the reward to outcome, if you've done a certain behaviour for so many days in a row, that's what gets the reward, rather than I'm only rewarding myself when I've achieved a certain something.
Yeah, and I guess in a financial context, we need to make sure that the rewards are all in the budget. Thank you so much, Jacqui.
Absolutely.
So much gold in there. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to The Prosperity Project. You can follow this podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and please do chuck us a rating or a review while you're there. For more personal finance and business content, head to nzherald.co.nz, and please do feel free to get in touch with your questions and your stories. nadine.higgins at nzherald.co.nz. A reminder, though, that this podcast is informational only and nothing we say here should be considered personalised financial advice. But also remember that while listening to this podcast is hopefully going to be additive to your financial knowledge, and that is fantastic, knowing stuff doesn't create change. Doing stuff does. So what action are you going to take today to make your life more prosperous? My producer for this episode is Ethan Sills. Sound engineer is Richard Martin. I'm Nadine Higgins. Thanks for listening to The Prosperity Project.